December 1944, Belgian Ardennes Forest. My name is James Sullivan, but everyone back home in Boston called me Jimmy. I was 22 years old when I found myself knee-deep in snow, clutching my M1 Garand with frozen fingers, wondering if I'd ever see my mother's face again. They didn't tell us it would be like this when we shipped out. The recruitment posters showed brave men charging forward, flags waving, glory waiting around every corner. Nobody mentioned the cold that seeped into your bones and stayed there, or the way your best friend's blood looked against fresh snow. Sullivan. Eyes forward, damn it! Sergeant McKinney's voice cut through the wind. He was a tough son of a gun from Oklahoma, with a face like weathered leather and eyes that had seen too much. Yes, Sergeant, I muttered, adjusting my helmet. My breath came out in white clouds that disappeared into the gray December sky. We were part of the 99th Infantry Division, holding a defensive line near the German border. Intelligence said the Germans were beaten, that the war would be over by Christmas. Intelligence was wrong. It started before dawn on December 16th. The earth shook like God himself was angry. German artillery pounded our positions with a fury I'd never imagined possible. Trees exploded into splinters. Men screamed. The world turned into fire and smoke and terror. They're coming through, someone yelled. Panzers. Panzers on the road. I pressed myself against the frozen ground in our foxhole, next to Private Eddie Martinez from El Paso. Eddie was 19, still had baby fat on his cheeks, and wrote letters to his girl back home every single day. Jesus, Jimmy, Eddie whispered, his voice shaking. I can hear them. The tanks. They're everywhere. We hold the line, I said, trying to sound braver than I felt. That's what the Sarge said. We hold the line. But the line didn't hold. By mid-morning, our company was scattered. German infantry poured through gaps in our defenses like water through a broken dam. SS troops, mostly. You could tell by the camouflage and the ruthless efficiency. These weren't conscripts. These were fanatics. Fall back. Fall back to the secondary position. McKinney's order came through the chaos. We ran. There's no glory in admitting it, but that's what happened. We ran through the forest, stumbling over roots hidden by snow, gasping in the bitter cold. Artillery followed us. Mortar rounds walked closer and closer, throwing up geysers of frozen earth and shattered trees. I lost track of Eddie somewhere in the chaos. One moment he was behind me, the next, I turned around and he was gone. Just, gone. Martinez. I screamed. Eddie. Keep moving, Sullivan. McKinney grabbed my collar and yanked me forward. You stop now, you die now. We found what was left of our company near an abandoned farmhouse. 12 men. Out of the 47 we'd started the day with. Captain Rawlings was dead. Lieutenant Cooper was missing. That left Sergeant McKinney in command, and he looked like a man who'd aged 10 years in 10 hours. We're cut off, said Corporal Davis, a quiet guy from Pennsylvania who'd been a teacher before the war. His glasses were cracked, held together with medical tape. Germans are between us and our lines. Then we move at night, McKinney said. East, through the forest. Circle around their advance and link up with the 2nd Division. That's 15 miles through enemy territory, Davis protested. You got a better idea, Corporal? Davis didn't answer. We hunkered down in the farmhouse as darkness fell. No fire, despite the cold. Fire meant smoke, and smoke meant death. I sat with my back against a wall, trying to stop my hands from shaking. It wasn't just the cold anymore. Private Tommy O'Brien, a red-headed kid from Chicago, sat across from me. He was cleaning his rifle, over and over, even though it was already clean. You think Eddie made it? He asked quietly. Sure, I lied. Eddie's tough. Probably found another unit. Yeah, O'Brien said, but neither of us believed it. At 2,300 hours, we moved out. Single file, 20 yards between each man. The forest was pitch black except for the snow, which seemed to glow with some faint light of its own. Every sound made us freeze. Every shadow could be death. We'd gone maybe 3 miles when I heard it. Voices. German voices. McKinney raised his fist. We dropped to the ground, silent as ghosts. Through the trees, maybe 50 yards ahead, I could see them. A German patrol. 8 men, maybe 10. They were moving perpendicular to us, would pass right across our path. We held our breath. McKinney signaled for us to stay down, stay quiet. If they didn't spot us, they'd be gone in minutes. That's when O'Brien's rifle went off. I don't know if it was an accident, if his frozen finger slipped, or if panic took over. But that single shot shattered the night like breaking glass. Everything happened at once. The Germans opened fire. We returned fire. Tracers cut through the darkness like angry fireflies. I squeezed my trigger, felt the Garand's kick against my shoulder, ejected the clip with that distinctive ping and reloaded without thinking. Go! 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 McKinney roared. We scattered into the forest. Survival instinct took over. The textbook said you should stay together, maintain unit cohesion. But when bullets are cracking past your head and men are dying around you, textbooks don't mean much. I ran blindly, crashing through underbrush, sliding down an embankment. I heard someone running behind me, couldn't tell who. The shooting faded behind us, replaced by shouts in German and the baying of dogs. They'd brought dogs. My foot caught on something and I went down hard, sliding across ice into a small ravine. Pain shot through my ankle. I bit down on my glove to keep from crying out. Footsteps. Close. Too close. I rolled onto my back, bringing my rifle up. A figure appeared at the top of the ravine, silhouetted against the slightly lighter sky. German. He hadn't seen me yet. He was looking the other way, back toward the sounds of pursuit. I should have shot him. Every instinct, every bit of training said, shoot him before he sees you. But I didn't. Maybe it was the way he stood there, just another scared kid in a uniform that wasn't so different from mine. Maybe I was tired of killing. Maybe I just froze up. He turned. Our eyes met. For one long, impossible moment, we stared at each other across maybe 15 feet of snow-covered ground. He was young, younger than me. Blonde hair under his helmet. Wide blue eyes. His hand moved toward his weapon. Time slowed down. My finger tightened on the trigger. Then the world exploded. An artillery shell, I don't know if it was German or American, landed somewhere close. The concussion wave lifted me off the ground and slammed me into a tree trunk. My helmet flew off. Stars burst behind my eyes. When my vision cleared, the German soldier was gone. Or maybe he'd never been there. Maybe I'd imagined him. I tried to stand. My ankle screamed in protest. Something warm ran down the side of my face. Blood. More voices in German, getting closer. The dogs were getting closer too. I dragged myself deeper into the ravine, found a hollow beneath an overhanging rock. I pulled branches and snow over myself, making a makeshift hide. It wouldn't fool anyone in daylight, but in the dark, maybe. I lay there, barely breathing, as the German patrol passed within yards of my position. The dogs sniffed and whined, pulling at their leashes, but their handlers kept moving, pursuing sounds deeper in the forest. Silence settled over the woods. A dangerous, heavy silence. I must have passed out, because when I opened my eyes again, gray dawn light was filtering through my covering of branches. My whole body hurt. My ankle was swollen to twice its normal size. The bleeding on my head had stopped, but dried blood matted my hair. I needed to move. Needed to find my unit, or any American unit. Needed to get away from this place before the Germans came back in daylight. But when I tried to crawl out of my hiding spot, agony shot through my leg. The ankle wasn't just sprained. It might be broken. I was alone, injured, deep in enemy territory, and the temperature was dropping again. For the first time since I'd left Boston, I thought I might actually die here. That's when I heard the footsteps. Boots crunching in the snow. Deliberate. Searching. I reached for my rifle, then realized with cold horror that it wasn't there. I must have lost it when the shell exploded. The footsteps stopped. Right above my hiding place. Branches were pulled away. Light flooded in. A German soldier stood over me, rifle pointed at my chest. It was him. The young blonde soldier from last night. Those same wide blue eyes. We stared at each other again. His finger was on the trigger. Mine might as well have been on his. Americanish, he said quietly. It wasn't a question. I didn't answer. What could I say? He glanced over his shoulder, then back at me. For a long moment, I thought he was deciding whether to shoot me himself or call for his squad. Then he did something I never expected. He lowered his rifle. "Bleib here," he said. "Stay here." He threw the branches back over my hiding spot and walked away. I lay there in shock, heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst. Why hadn't he killed me? Why hadn't he turned me in? I didn't understand it then. I wouldn't understand it until 3 days later, when everything changed. December 19, 1944, somewhere in the Ardennes. I stayed in that frozen hellhole for 6 hours after the German soldier walked away. Every sound made me think he was coming back with his entire squad. Every crack of a branch was a rifle bolt being pulled. Every distant voice was death marching closer. But nothing happened. The forest around me slowly came to life with the sounds of war in the distance. Artillery rumbled like thunder that wouldn't stop. Occasionally, I heard vehicles on what must have been a road somewhere to the north. German vehicles, pushing deeper into Allied territory. My ankle had swollen so much that my boot felt like it was cutting off circulation. I needed water. I needed food. I needed medical attention. But most of all, I needed to move, to get out of German-occupied territory. I tried to stand 3 times. Each time, the pain drove me back down, white-hot and nauseating. "Come on, Sullivan," I muttered to myself. "You didn't survive Boston winters and Sergeant McKinney's training just to die in a ditch." But my body wasn't listening to my bravado. By mid-afternoon, I was drifting in and out of consciousness. Hypothermia was setting in. I could feel it in the way my thoughts were getting fuzzy, how the cold didn't seem quite as bad anymore. That's when it gets dangerous, when the cold starts feeling warm. I thought about my mother back in Boston, probably lighting candles at St. Augustine's, praying for me. My kid sister Mary, who cried when I enlisted. My father, who died in a factory accident when I was 16, leaving me to be the man of the house. I wondered if they'd ever know what happened to me, or if I'd just be another name on a telegram. "We regret to inform you." That's when I heard the footsteps again. My eyes snapped open. It was getting dark. How long had I been out? The branches over my hiding spot moved. I tensed, ready to fight even though I had nothing to fight with. It was him again. The German soldier. He crouched at the edge of my hiding spot, glancing nervously over his shoulder. In his hands, he carried something wrapped in cloth. "Here," he whispered, pushing the bundle toward me. "Schnell." I stared at him, then at the bundle. He gestured urgently, looking back toward where his unit must have been. Slowly, I unwrapped it. Inside was half a loaf of dark bread, a piece of hard cheese, and a canteen. I looked up at him, stunned. "Why?" He didn't understand the word, but he understood the question in my eyes. He touched his chest. "Klaus," he said quietly. Then he pointed at me, eyebrows raised. "James," I said. "Jimmy." "Skimmy," he repeated, mangling the pronunciation. In any other situation, it might have been funny. He pointed at my ankle, made a questioning gesture. "Broken, I think," I said, miming the injury. Can't walk. Klaus frowned, understanding the problem if not the words. He looked back again, clearly worried about being discovered. Du bleibst, he said firmly. You stay. Ich komme zurück. I come back. Before I could respond, he was gone, melting into the forest shadows like he'd never been there. I sat there holding the bread and canteen, my mind reeling. Why was he helping me? We were enemies. Yesterday I'd been trying to kill men wearing the same uniform he wore. His friends, maybe. But my stomach didn't care about philosophy. I tore into the bread like a starving animal, which I guess I was. The cheese was hard and salty but tasted better than anything I'd eaten in months. The canteen held water that was ice-cold but clean. As I ate, I tried to make sense of it. Maybe he was young enough to still have some humanity left. Maybe he was sick of the war, sick of killing. Or maybe he was just a decent person who saw another human being suffering and couldn't walk away. I thought about last night, how I'd hesitated to shoot him. Maybe he remembered that. Maybe he figured he owed me. Or maybe I was overthinking it, and he'd come back with his entire squad to take me prisoner. But he didn't. December 20th, 1944. Klaus came back the next morning. This time he brought medical supplies, bandages, a small bottle of what smelled like schnapps for disinfecting, and a piece of wood that could work as a splint. He also brought a private first class named Franz, who looked nervous as a cat in a dog pound. Bist du verrückt? Franz hissed at Klaus. Are you crazy? Even I could tell that's what he was saying from his tone. Klaus snapped something back in German, sharp and firm. Franz looked at me, at Klaus, then sighed and knelt down next to my hiding spot. Franz, it turned out, had worked as a veterinarian's assistant before the war. Not a doctor, but close enough. He examined my ankle with surprisingly gentle hands, prodding and rotating while I bit down on a stick to keep from screaming. Nicht gebrochen, Franz said finally. Aber schwer verstockt. Not broken, but badly sprained. They fashioned a splint, wrapping my ankle tight with the bandages. Franz poured some of the schnapps on my head wound, which burned like hellfire. I nearly passed out again. Warum hilfst du ihm? Franz asked Klaus quietly. Why are you helping him? Klaus was silent for a moment, staring at my ankle. When he spoke, his voice was barely a whisper. Mein Bruder, he said. My brother. In Stalingrad. Russisch Gefangen. Russian prisoner. Franz's expression softened. He nodded slowly. I didn't understand the words, but I understood the meaning. Klaus had a brother who was a prisoner somewhere in Russia. Maybe he hoped that someone, somewhere, was showing his brother the same mercy he was showing me. Before they left, Klaus pulled something else from his coat. A photograph. He showed it to me, a picture of two young men in civilian clothes, arms around each other's shoulders, both grinning. They looked alike. Brothers. Klaus pointed at the other one, then touched his heart. Heinrich, he said. The brother's name. I hope he's okay, I said quietly, knowing Klaus wouldn't understand the words but hoping he'd understand the tone. He seemed to. He nodded, pocketed the photo, and stood up. Drei Tage, Klaus said, holding up 3 fingers. Dan Ziehen were whiter. Then we move on. Du must fort sein. You must be gone. 3 days. He was giving me 3 days before his unit moved to a different position. After that, I'd be on my own. It wasn't much, but it was a chance. December 21st, 1944. Over the next 2 days, Klaus came back 3 more times. Each visit was brief, furtive. Each time he brought something, more food, a blanket he'd clearly stolen from supply, even a German field jacket to replace my shredded American one. Tarnung, he explained, pointing at the German insignia. Camouflage. If I was spotted from a distance, I might pass as one of them. We couldn't really communicate beyond gestures and the handful of words we taught each other. But something was forming between us. Not quite friendship, how could it be, given the circumstances, but understanding. Recognition. We were both just kids in uniforms we'd never asked for, fighting a war we didn't start, trying to survive until we could go home. On the third night, Klaus brought Franz again. They came after dark, more agitated than before. "Hör zu," Franz said urgently. "Listen." He pointed north. "Amerikaner. 2 Kilometer, asterisk, 2 kilometers. American lines. That close?" Klaus pulled out a crude map he'd drawn on a piece of paper. He pointed at an X, then traced a route with his finger. He was showing me how to get there. "Morgen früh," Klaus said. "Tomorrow morning. We're gehen. Du gehst. We go. You go." His unit was moving out at dawn. This was my chance. I grabbed Klaus's arm. "Thank you," I said, putting every ounce of meaning I could into those 2 words. "Thank you." He understood. "Geh nach Hause, Skimmy. Go home, Jimmy. Überlet. Survive." They left, and I prepared for what I knew would be the hardest 2 kilometers of my life. December 22, 1944, dawn. I waited until I heard Klaus's unit moving out, the sounds of men and vehicles heading east, away from where the map said American lines were. Then I started moving north. Every step was agony, even with the splint. I used a branch as a makeshift crutch, dragging myself through the snow. The German jacket Klaus had given me was probably saving my life, but wearing it made me feel like a traitor. I'd gone maybe half a kilometer when I heard it. Gunfire. Close. Very close. I dropped into the snow, trying to make myself invisible. Through the trees ahead, I could see movement. Figures in white winter camouflage, advancing through the forest. American soldiers. Relief flooded through me. I'd made it. I was almost safe. I started to stand, to call out to them, when I heard something else. German voices. Behind me. I turned and saw them, 3 German soldiers, retreating through the forest, probably stragglers from Klaus's unit. They hadn't seen me yet, but they were heading straight toward where the Americans were advancing. It was going to be a firefight, and I was going to be right in the middle of it. I pressed myself into a depression in the ground, covering myself with snow as best I could. The Germans spotted the Americans. Shots rang out. The Americans returned fire. I stayed down, praying that neither side would notice me, that I could just wait it out. Then I saw him. Klaus. He was one of the 3 German soldiers, along with Franz and another man I didn't recognize. They'd taken cover behind a fallen log, pinned down by American fire. Klaus looked terrified. He couldn't be more than 30 yards from my position. The Americans were flanking them. I could see it developing, 2 soldiers moving around through the trees while the others kept the Germans pinned. In about 60 seconds, Klaus and his companions would be caught in a crossfire. They'd be killed. I didn't think. I just acted. I stood up, waving my arms, shouting in English. "Hold your fire. Hold your fire. Friendly. American." The Americans saw me, saw the German jacket, hesitated. "I'm American. 99th Infantry. James Sullivan, Private First Class. Don't shoot." A sergeant moved forward, rifle trained on me. "The hell you doing in a Kraut uniform, soldier?" "Long story, Sarge. But listen, those 3 Germans behind the log. They're surrendering." I looked directly at Klaus. "Klaus. Ergeben. Verstehst du? Surrender. Understand?" I'd learned that word from Franz. Klaus stared at me, his face a mask of shock and confusion. "Die Waffen weg." I shouted. "Weapons away. Ergeben. Surrender." For one long, terrible moment, I thought Klaus wouldn't do it. thought he'd decide to go down fighting rather than become a prisoner. Then he slowly raised his hands. "We're Urjuban UNS. We surrender." Franz and the other soldier followed his lead, standing with their hands up. The American sergeant moved forward cautiously, his men covering the Germans. They were zip-tied and searched, weapons confiscated. As they were being led away, Klaus looked back at me. Our eyes met one last time. There was a question in his gaze. Why? Why had I saved him? I didn't have a good answer. Maybe I owed him. Maybe I couldn't stand the thought of him dying after he'd saved my life. Maybe I'd just seen too much death already. Or maybe we'd both learned that the enemy isn't always who they tell you it is. "You know these Krauts, Sullivan?" the sergeant asked, watching Klaus and the others being marched away. "Yeah, Sarge," I said quietly. "I know them." He looked at me skeptically but didn't press. "You need a medic?" "Yeah. And a way back to my unit. If there's anything left of it. Let's get you sorted out, son. You look like you've been through hell. You don't know the half of it, Sarge." As they helped me back toward American lines, I watched Klaus's retreating figure disappear into the forest. I wondered if he'd survive the POW camps, if he'd ever make it home to look for his brother Heinrich. I wondered if I'd ever know. But for now, we were both alive. In a war where that seemed like a miracle, maybe that was enough. March 7, 1945, Remagen, Germany. 3 months had passed since the Ardennes. I'd been patched up at a field hospital, spent 2 weeks recovering, then rejoined what was left of my unit. The 99th had been reformed, reinforced with fresh replacements who didn't know what hell looked like yet. We pushed forward as the German army collapsed, town by town, mile by bloody mile. I thought about Klaus sometimes. Wondered if he was in some POW camp in France or England, alive and waiting for the war to end. Wondered if his brother Heinrich had made it out of Russia. Wondered if I'd ever know. I'd written the whole thing down in a letter to my mother but never sent it. How could I explain that a German soldier had saved my life, and I'd returned the favor? How could I make her understand that for 3 days in the frozen hell of the Ardennes, the enemy had been more human than I'd ever imagined possible? So I kept it to myself. Another war story that would stay buried. Until Remagen. We'd been advancing along the Rhine for weeks. Every bridge we reached, the Germans had already destroyed. That was their strategy: blow the bridges, slow the Allied advance, buy time for a defense that wasn't coming. But on March 7th, we got lucky. The Ludendorff Bridge at Remagen was still standing. "Move! Move! Move!" Lieutenant Harrison shouted. He was young, maybe 25, fresh from officer candidate school and eager to prove himself. "We take that bridge before they blow it." Our company was part of the first wave. Engineers ran ahead of us, searching for demolition charges. German fire rained down from the bluffs on the far side, machine guns, mortars, snipers. Men dropped around me. I was different now than I'd been in December. Harder. I'd seen too much, lost too many friends. Tommy O'Brien had been killed in January. Sergeant McKinney had lost his leg to a mine in February. The kid who'd hesitated to shoot a German soldier in the Ardennes didn't exist anymore. We charged across the bridge through a storm of steel. The structure shuddered beneath our feet, whether from explosions or the weight of tanks rolling across, I couldn't tell. We made it to the eastern bank, established a perimeter. Against all odds, we'd captured an intact bridge across the Rhine. It was a miracle. It was the beginning of the end for Germany. But the Germans weren't giving up without a fight. March 9, 1945. For 2 days, we held the bridgehead against constant counterattacks. The Germans threw everything they had at us: tanks, infantry, artillery. They knew what losing this bridge meant. On the 3rd day, they brought in prisoners. POWs were being used to clear rubble and help with construction work on our side of the river. Hundreds of them, guarded by MPs, digging trenches and filling sandbags under American supervision. I was pulling security duty on the eastern approach when I saw them being marched through. Defeated men in tattered uniforms, most looking like they were grateful the war was over for them. That's when I saw him. Klaus. He was thinner than I remembered, a healing scar across his left cheek that hadn't been there in December. But those blue eyes were unmistakable. He was in a work detail, carrying sandbags with 5 other prisoners. Our eyes met across 30 feet of churned mud. Recognition flashed across his face, then surprise, then something like relief. "Skimmy," he said quietly. The MP guard looked at me suspiciously. "You know this one, Sullivan?" "Yeah," I said. "We've met." Klaus set down his sandbag and took a step toward me. The guard raised his rifle. "Stay where you are, Kraut." "It's okay," I told the guard. "Just give us a minute." The guard looked uncertain but nodded. "1 minute. I'll be right over there." Klaus approached slowly, hands visible, non-threatening. Up close, I could see how much the war had taken from him. There were lines in his face that hadn't been there in December, a weariness in his eyes. "Du lebst," he said. "You live." "So do you," I replied. "Your English any better?" He smiled slightly. "Little bit. I learn from other prisoners." "Your brother? Heinrich? Did you?" Klaus's smile faded. He shook his head once. "Tot. Stalingrad. Dead. I'm sorry." "War," Klaus said simply, as if that one word explained everything. Maybe it did. "Klaus, I need you to listen to me," I said urgently. "They're moving prisoners to camps in France tomorrow. You'll be okay. The war's almost over. Just keep your head down, survive a few more months, then you can go home." "Ja," Klaus nodded. "I know. Is okay, Skimmy. You saved me already. Now I go home when war finish." We talked for a few more minutes before the MP came back and told Klaus to get back to work. We shook hands, a strange moment of connection across the divide of war, and then he was gone, back to his work detail. I thought that would be the last time I'd see him. I was wrong. March 10, 1945, 1,600 hours. The attack came without warning. German bombers appeared through the clouds, Stukas and Messerschmitts on a suicide mission to destroy the bridge. Our anti-aircraft guns opened up, filling the sky with black puffs of flak. 2 planes went down immediately, spinning into the Rhine in spirals of smoke and flame. But one got through. I was in a forward observation post near the bridge's eastern tower when I heard it, the scream of the diving bomber, growing louder, becoming everything. "Incoming," someone shouted. The bomb hit the bridge's center span. The explosion was enormous, shaking the earth, throwing men off their feet. The structure groaned like a dying animal. Cables snapped with sounds like gunshots. Then the tower started to collapse. I don't remember the first few seconds clearly. One moment I was in the observation post, the next I was falling through dust and debris. Stone blocks the size of cars crashed around me. A steel girder missed my head by inches. I landed hard on what had been the observation post's floor, now tilted at a 45-degree angle. My rifle was gone. My helmet was gone. Blood ran into my eyes from somewhere. Above me, the rest of the tower groaned, shifting, getting ready to come down on top of me. I tried to move. Couldn't. My leg was pinned under a concrete block, trapped. I pulled, pushed, screamed with effort. The block didn't budge. The groaning grew louder. Dust and small stones rained down. The tower was collapsing, and I was going to die here, crushed under tons of German engineering. "Help!" I shouted. "Somebody help me!" But the chaos of the bombing had scattered everyone. Through the dust, I could see men running, shouting, trying to save themselves and their buddies. No one could hear me. No one was coming. The structure shifted again. A crack appeared in the wall above me, spreading like lightning frozen in stone. This was it. This was how I died. Then I heard footsteps. Running. Getting closer. A figure burst through the dust and smoke. For a crazy second, I thought it was an angel, come to carry me to wherever soldiers go when they die. It was Klaus. He must have been on a work detail nearby when the bombing started. His face was cut, his uniform torn. He looked at me, at the concrete block pinning my leg, at the collapsing tower above us. "Skimmy," he said. "Klaus, get out of here." I shouted. "It's coming down." He ignored me. He knelt next to the concrete block, got his shoulder under it, and lifted. "Klaus, you can't." "Schweig." "Shut up." He grunted with effort, muscles straining, face going red. "Sie dein Bien raus." "Pull your leg out." I pulled. My leg came free, screaming with pain but free. "Go. Go." Klaus shouted, his English failing him in the crisis. We ran, him half carrying me, as the tower came down behind us. The roar was deafening, apocalyptic. Stones and steel crashed where we'd been standing seconds before. We made it maybe 20 yards before the shockwave from the collapse threw us forward. We hit the ground hard, rolling, covering our heads as debris rained around us. Then silence. Ringing silence, punctuated only by the settling of rubble and the distant sounds of men shouting. I lifted my head. Dust choked the air, making it hard to see or breathe. Klaus was next to me, coughing, bleeding from a dozen cuts. "You crazy son of a bitch," I gasped. "You could have been killed." Klaus looked at me, and despite everything, the blood, the dust, the pain, he smiled. "Jetzt sind wir quitt," he said. "Now we're even." I started laughing. I couldn't help it. Here we were, enemies by uniform but brothers by survival, sitting in the ruins of a bridge in Germany while the war raged around us, and he was keeping score. "Yeah," I said. "Yeah, I guess we are." MPs came running, along with medics. They pulled us both to safety, started treating our wounds. Klaus was immediately surrounded by guards, rifles pointed, men shouting about escaped prisoners. "Stand down!" I roared, finding authority I didn't know I had. "This man just saved my life. You point those rifles somewhere else." A captain came running up, taking in the scene. "What the hell happened here, Sullivan?" "This prisoner pulled me out of that collapse, sir. Risked his life to save mine. He's a hero." The captain looked at Klaus, at me, at the ruins of the tower. "That true, Private?" "Yes, sir. Every word." The captain studied Klaus for a long moment. Then he nodded to the MPs, "Lower your weapons. Get them both to the aid station." As medics worked on us, side by side, Klaus and I sat in silence for a while. There wasn't much to say. We'd each saved the other's life. In a war that had taken millions, two men had survived because they'd seen each other as human first, enemy second. "What will you do?" I asked him. "After the war?" Klaus thought about it. "Nach Hause gehen," he said. "Go home. My mother. My sister. They need me." "And Heinrich?" "Ich werde in Nie vergessen. I will never forget him." "None of us will forget," I said quietly. "Any of this." April 30, 1945, Pau Camp, France. The war in Europe ended 3 weeks later. Hitler was dead. Germany surrendered. It was over. I was shipped back to the States in June, honorably discharged with a Purple Heart and a combat infantryman badge. I went home to Boston, to my mother and sister, to a world that seemed impossibly normal after everything I'd seen. But before I left Europe, I managed to get a message to Klaus through the Red Cross prisoner system. Just a simple note. "Thank you for the bread. Thank you for my life. Go home to your family. Live well. Your friend, Jimmy." I never knew if he got it. May 1947, Boston, Massachusetts. 2 years after the war ended, I was working in my father's old factory, living in the same apartment I'd grown up in, trying to be normal again. It wasn't easy. The war followed me home in nightmares and sudden fears and memories that wouldn't fade. One day, a letter arrived. The envelope had German stamps. The handwriting was careful, deliberate. My hands shook as I opened it. Dear Tskimmy, I hope this letter finds you well. I am home in Germany now, in a small town you have never heard of. It was very hard after the war, but things are better now. I received your message. It meant very much to me. I want you to know that I think of you often. I think of those days in the forest, when the war made us enemies but humanity made us brothers. My mother is alive. My sister is married. I work now in a school, teaching children. I try to teach them that hate is not the answer, that even in war, we are all human. I will never forget Heinrich. But I will also never forget you, and what we learned in that frozen forest, that enemies are made by war, but friends are made by choice. I hope one day the world will not need more soldiers. I hope one day, boys like we were can just be boys, not warriors. Thank you, my friend. For everything. Klaus Zimmermann. I sat at my kitchen table, reading and rereading that letter, tears running down my face that I didn't bother to hide. My mother came in, saw me crying, and put her hand on my shoulder. Jimmy? What is it? I'm okay, Ma, I said. These are good tears. I folded the letter carefully and put it in my pocket, close to my heart, where it would stay for the rest of my life. October 1988. I'm an old man now. The war is ancient history to most people, something in textbooks and documentaries. But for those of us who were there, it's as fresh as yesterday. I kept Klaus's letter all these years. We wrote back and forth for decades, sharing our lives across the ocean that had once separated enemies. I learned about his wife, his children, his grandchildren. He learned about mine. We never saw each other again in person. Life, distance, and circumstance kept us apart. But in every letter, in every Christmas card, in every update about our growing families, the bond remained. Yesterday, I received a different kind of letter from Germany. From Klaus's daughter, Anna. Her father had passed away peacefully in his sleep. He was 72 years old. At the end, she wrote, he'd been holding two things, a photograph of his brother Heinrich, and a yellowed letter from an American soldier named Jimmy. She thanked me for being her father's friend. She said he'd told her the story of the Ardennes many times, how a moment of mercy in the midst of war had saved both our lives and taught us both what it meant to be human. I'm crying again as I write this. Good tears, like I told my mother 40 years ago. The war taught me many things. It taught me about fear and courage, about loss and survival, about the terrible cost of hate. But Klaus taught me something more important. He taught me that enemies are made by politicians and generals, but humanity is a choice we make for ourselves. He taught me that in the darkest moments, when it would be easy to give in to hate, we can choose mercy instead. I thought he was my enemy. The uniform, the flag, the language, everything said he was someone I should kill, someone who wanted to kill me. But he saved my life. And in doing so, he saved something more. He saved my faith that even in the midst of hell, goodness can survive. Tonight, I'll light a candle for Klaus Zimmermann. For Heinrich, who never came home. For Eddie Martinez and Tommy O'Brien and all the others who didn't make it back. For Franz, who helped save my life alongside his friend. For Sergeant McKinney, who taught me how to be a soldier. And I'll say a prayer of gratitude that in a war that took so much, I was given the gift of understanding that the person across no man's land isn't always your enemy. Sometimes, against all odds, he's your brother. James Jimmy Sullivan, Boston, Massachusetts, October 1988.